Byzantine Emperor Basil II, whose reign from 976 to 1025 marked one of the heights of the Byzantine Empire. But you may know him better as Basil the Bulgar Slayer. This moniker was earned through his relentless and effective military campaigns against the nearby Bulgarian Empire, culminating in the Battle of Kleidion in 1014, where his forces decisively crushed the Bulgarians. A victory that was so complete that Basil blinded thousands of captured soldiers, leaving one in every 100 with a single eye, forming a chain to lead the others back home. A brutal act that cemented his fearsome reputation, and one that, no doubt, brings you here. Hello and welcome to the channel. If it is your first time here, it's good to meet you, and if you're coming back, great to see you again. Surely you know what you're in for. As always, if you'd like to support the channel, there is a link in the description. Otherwise, the best thing you can do for me is like, comment, and subscribe, as this tells YouTube to push the video out further. So, with that being said, let us begin. Please get yourself relaxed and close your eyes, and we may continue our life of Basil the Bulgar Slayer. Born in 958, Basil was the eldest son of Romanos II and Theophano, a woman who was of Laconian Greek origin. Theophano, his mother, was actually the daughter of Crateros, who was reportedly a poor tavern keeper, and was possibly from the city of Sparta, which at that point was quite different to what you think it to be in the ancient times. Now Basil possibly had an elder sister, Helena, who was born 3 years before him, around the year 955. He was what the Greeks call a porphyrogenitos, which means born into the purple. The significance of the purple being the royal color. This poorly pronounced title was given to children born during their father's reign, a distinction which he shared with his own father, Romanos II, and grandfather Constantine VII. Romanos II, his father, who took the throne after the death of Constantine VII in 959, crowned Basil as co-emperor on April 22nd, 960. Basil's younger brother, Constantine, born in 960 or 61, was crowned in 962 or 63, and later ruled as Constantine VIII from 1025 to 1028. Romanos, unfortunately, died unexpectedly in the March of 963, at the age of 24, just 2 days after the birth of his youngest child, Anna. His death was, of course, widely suspected to be due to poisoning by hemlock, which is, by the way, the same poison that Socrates ingested, and I believe a Hungarian prime minister a few years ago. Look up that video if you dare. Well, chroniclers like Leo the Deacon and John Scilezes suggest that Theophano was actually involved in this poisoning, also noting her possible role in earlier plots against Constantine VII. Well, I suppose perhaps we will never really know. Well, following their father's death, Basil and his brother Constantine were still way too young to rule, The Byzantine Senate confirmed their positions as emperors, with Theophano as the nominal regent, but actual power shifted to Joseph Bringas. Theophano was distrustful of Bringas and found an ally in Basil Lekepenos, an illegitimate son of Emperor Romanos I, not the second, the first, and he was also a eunuch, who had previously served under Constantine VII and Romanus II. Well, another opponent of Bringas was the celebrated general Nikephoros Phokas, fresh from victories in Crete and a raid into Cilicia and Syria, which culminated in the sack of Aleppo. In July, Phokas was declared emperor by his troops and advanced on Constantinople. With the populace's support, Phokas forced Bringas to flee, and Basil Lekepenos took over his position. Nikephoros Phokas was crowned on August the 16th, 963. In the same year, on September 20th, Phokas married Theophano, despite it being each spouse's second marriage, and also rather malicious rumors that he was the godfather to Basil or his brother. Well, despite Patriarch Polyectus of Constantinople's objections, the marriage was eventually declared valid. This legitimized Nikephoros' rule, and also his guardianship over Romanos' sons. Well, he did not last that long. He was assassinated in December 969 by, guess who? Theophano, and also his own nephew, John Zimisces, who then became Emperor John I. John I then moved to exile Theophano and married Theodora, Romanos II's sister. Upon John's death on January the 10th, 976, Basil became the effective and senior emperor. He immediately recalled his mother from her convent, marking the beginning of his direct rule. Thus Basil II emerged as a skilled soldier and horseman, and his military prowess proved him to be a capable general and decisive ruler. In the initial phase of his reign, Basil chose to, rather than act, just observe and learn, allowing administration to be managed by Basil Lekepenos, the president of the Byzantine Senate. Lekepenos was a cunning and talented politician who intended to use the young emperors as puppets for his own ends. During this period, Basil focused on mastering the intricacies of administration and military strategy. Now the emperors preceding Basil, Nikephoros II and John I, were indeed exceptional military leaders, but they lacked administrative skills. Toward the end of his reign, John I attempted to limit the power of the major landowners, a move that prompted speculation that he was poisoned by Lekepenos, who himself had amassed large estates, illegally, and of course feared repercussions because of it. The failures of Nikephoros and John left Basil facing significant challenges, particularly from Bardas Skleros and Bardas Phokas. These members of the influential military aristocracy of Anatolia possessed the resources and ambition to challenge his authority openly. Skleros and Phocas, both experienced generals, aspired to the imperial power held by Nikephoros and John, and aimed to reduce Basil to a mere figurehead. Displaying a ruthless determination, Basil took direct command in the field to quell the revolts that were led by Skleros in 979, and later those led by Phocas in 989. He was supported in these efforts by 12,000 Georgians from Tournikios and David III Kuropalates of Tau. The downfall of Lekepinos was marked in 985 between the two rebellions. He was accused of conspiring with the rebels and was stripped of his power, exiled, and all of those properties, they were confiscated. This action by Basil II not only subdued the immediate threats, but it also signaled a shift in his approach. No longer sitting back and observing, he was done with that. He took a more active and direct role in the governance and also the defense of the empire. The intricate dynamic between generals Phocas and Skleros significantly shaped the early part of Basil's reign. Initially, Phocas played a crucial role in quelling the rebellion led by Skleros. However, the tables turned when Phocas initiated his own rebellion, prompting Skleros to emerge from exile and support him. This complex relationship was further tangled when Phocas died in battle, leading to Skleros assuming control of the rebellion. Despite his earlier imprisonment by Phocas, Skleros continued the insurrection against Basil, albeit desperately. During this period, Basil's brother, Constantine, participated in only one military campaign, and displayed very little interest in politics, statecraft, or military affairs. The campaign concluded without combat when Skleros finally surrendered to Basil in 989. Although Skleros was allowed to live, he eventually died blind, a condition caused either by disease or more likely as a punitive measure for his role in the uprisings. It was these events that profoundly influenced Basil's governance approach. Following Skleros's defeat, Michael Psellos recounts that Skleros advised Basil with words that would shape his reign, to keep governors and generals under tight control, to avoid excessive delegation of power, and to remain insulated from outside influences, particularly from women in matters of state. Basil adopted these strategies, focusing on centralizing power and maintaining direct control over military and administrative matters. To strengthen his position and suppress the revolts effectively, Basil formed a strategic alliance with Prince Vladimir I of Kiev. In 988, Vladimir captured Chersones, a vital Byzantine base in the Crimean Peninsula. In exchange for military support, Vladimir demanded the hand of Basil's younger sister, Anna. Initially hesitant due to the prevailing Byzantine view of the northern European peoples as barbarians, and of course Anna's personal objection to being married to a non-Byzantine ruler, Basil was eventually swayed by the broader implications of the alliance. Now, Vladimir's interest in Christianity, explored through delegations sent to various nations, was not merely for marital alliance, but it was actually a genuine shift in the religious orientation for his people. Basil agreed to the marriage when Vladimir promised that he would convert to Christianity and baptize all of his subjects. The marriage of Vladimir and Anna thus took place in Crimea in the year 989, and the 6,000 Rus warriors Vladimir provided were instrumental in ending the rebellion. No one really asked Anna how she thought about it, though, I assume. Well, these troops later formed the Varangian Guard. You may have heard of them, an elite unit in Basil's army. This alliance and marriage, of course, had lasting implications far beyond the wedding and the end of the rebellion, and it set the stage for the Grand Duchy of Moscow to later declare itself as the Third Rome, claiming the political and cultural heritage of the Byzantine Empire. This period also marked significant consolidation of Basil's power, establishing him as a ruler who skillfully navigated the complexities of both internal politics and external alliances. Once Basil had successfully suppressed the internal rebellions that plagued his early reign, he redirected his focus towards the external adversaries. The civil wars had significantly weakened the empire's stance in the east, almost reversing entirely the territorial gains that were made by his predecessors, being Nikephoros II and John I, gains against the Fatimid Caliphate. In the years 987 to 988, Basil managed to negotiate a 7-year truce with the Fatimids, which facilitated a prisoner exchange and established mutual recognition of protection for Christians and Muslims under the rule of the opposing side. Additionally, the agreement led to the Fatimid Caliph's name being recited in the Friday prayers in Constantinople, replacing that of the Abbasid Caliph. This truce held until the death of the influential Fatimid vizier Yaqub ibn Kilis in 991. The new Fatimid Caliph, Al-Aziz Billah, adopted a more aggressive policy, appointing Manjut Takin as the governor of Damascus and signaling a shift in the caliphate's approach towards the Byzantine territories. Manjut Takin began his aggressive campaigns by attacking the Hamdanid Emirate of Aleppo, which at the time was still a Byzantine protectorate. His forces defeated a Byzantine army under Michael Bortzes in June of 992 and laid siege to Aleppo, but the city held firm. By 993, after 13 long and grueling months, Manjut Takin's campaign stalled due to supply issues, and ultimately he was forced to retreat back to Damascus. But you know what they say, you can't keep a good man down. In 994, Manjut Takin resumed his offensive, achieving a significant victory too at the Battle of the Orontes in September. This defeat necessitated Basil's direct intervention. The next year, 995, in the month of April, Basil rapidly moved his army across Asia Minor to Aleppo in a march of just 16 days. The exaggerated reports of his army's size caused more than a little bit of panic among the Fatimid forces. Manjut Takin, caught off guard with his cavalry dispersed, chose to retreat to Damascus again, without engaging in battle. The Byzantines then made unsuccessful attempts to besiege Tripoli, and successfully occupied and fortified Tartus with Armenian troops. The warfare persisted, as the Byzantines backed an anti-Fatimid uprising in Tyre. In 998, under the new leadership of Damian Dalasenos, the Byzantines attacked Apamea, but were defeated by the Fatimid general Jaish ibn al-Samsama on the 19th of July 998. This setback drew Basil back into the conflict. He arrived in Syria in October of 999 and stayed for 3 months, with his forces raiding as far as Heliopolis. Despite placing a garrison at Larissa and burning minor forts near Abu Kubais, Mayas, and Arka, his campaign achieved limited strategic success, failing again at Tripoli, and ultimately not threatening Emesa. Basil's plans were disrupted by developments in Georgia, following the assassination of David III Kuropalates, which prompted his departure to Cilicia in January. Another round of diplomacy led to a 10-year truce in 1000 between the Byzantines and the Fatimids. During the reign of al-Hakim bi Amir Allah, who was more focused on internal affairs, relations remained generally peaceful. Funny how things remain peaceful when you have a policy of minding your own damn business. Well, even events like the acknowledgement of Fatimid suzerainty by Abu Muhammad Lulu al-Kabir of Aleppo in 1004, and the Fatimid-backed installation of Aziz al-Dawla as emir in 1017, didn't manage to reignite hostilities. Al-Hakim's persecution of Christians and the destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 1009, well, that certainly strained relations, but once again, did not lead to immediate military conflict. These developments showed the complexity of military action, diplomacy, and shifting alliances that characterized Basil's approach to handling these challenges and threats posed by the Fatimid Caliphate, not only in wartime, but this somewhat peacetime that balanced on the edge of a knife. The conquest of Bulgaria. That's what you're all here for, isn't it? Well, we're finally there. Of course, if you can't fight the Fatimids, you've got to fight somebody. Well, Basil II aimed to reassert Byzantine control over those lost territories, particularly focusing on Bulgaria, which was under the rule of King Samuel, one of his most formidable opponents. John I in previous times had partially subdued Bulgaria, following an invasion by Sviatoslav I of Kiev. But Samuel and his brothers, well, they maintained their own independent control over certain smaller parts of the country, and Basil did not like that. Since 976, the Bulgarians had conducted raids into Byzantine territories. In an effort to destabilize the Bulgarians, the Byzantine government facilitated the escape of the captive Bulgarian Emperor, Boris II. This strategy, however, failed to create the desired dissension among the Bulgarians, prompting Basil to take direct military action. Around 986, he led a formidable army, reportedly around 30,000 men, into Bulgaria and besieged the modern city of Sofia. I believe that's the capital of Bulgaria. Do correct me if I'm wrong. However, facing losses and doubting the loyalty of some of his governors, Basil decided to lift the siege. On his return to Thrace, he fell into an ambush, and thusly suffered a significant defeat at the Battle of the Gates of Trajan. Basil, however, did manage to escape, thanks to his Varangian Guard, remember them? And he sought to weaken Samuel by attempting to turn his brother Aaron against him through a marriage proposal involving Basil's sister Anna. Well, this plan fell apart when Aaron realized that the woman sent to him was an impostor and not the real Anna. By 987, Samuel had eliminated Aaron as a potential rival. Another of Samuel's brothers, David, was killed in 976 by the Vlachs, who were guarding caravans between Prespa and Castoria. Despite capturing the titular Bulgarian Emperor Roman in 991, Basil lost control of Moesia to the Bulgarians. While Basil was preoccupied with internal rebellions and stabilizing the eastern frontier, Samuel expanded his territory from the Adriatic to the Black Sea, effectively recovering most of the lands held by Bulgaria before Sviatoslav's invasion. He also launched damaging raids deep into Byzantine territory, reaching as far as central Greece. In 996, Byzantine general Nikephoros Oranos countered with a victory over a Bulgarian raiding party at the Battle of Spercheios in Thessaly, with Samuel and his son Gabriel narrowly escaping capture. Well, by 1000, Basil was back, and he was ready to focus on a comprehensive war of conquest against Bulgaria. That year, the Byzantine generals Nikephoros Xiphias and Theodorokanos captured the former Bulgarian capital, Great Preslav, along with Lesser Preslav and Pliskova. The following year, 1001, operating from Thessalonica, Basil regained control of Vodena, Veroia, and Servia. That following year, he stationed his army in the Philippopolis and seized control of the military road from the western Hamios Mountains to the Danube, effectively severing the connection between Samuel's Macedonian heartland and Paristrion. After this, Basil laid siege to Vidin, which eventually capitulated, but they put out a pretty lengthy resistance. In response to the Byzantine campaign, Samuel launched a large-scale raid of his own into the heart of Byzantine Thrace and unexpectedly captured the major city of Adrianople. After turning homeward, laden with extensive plunder, Samuel was intercepted near Skopje by a Byzantine army commanded by Basil himself, whose forces stormed the Bulgarian camp, defeating the Bulgarians and recovering the plunder from Adrianople. Skopje surrendered shortly after the battle, and Basil treated its governor, Romanos, with overt kindness. In 1005, the governor of Dyrrhachium, Ashot Taronites, surrendered his city to the Byzantines as well. The defection of Dyrrhachium completed the isolation of Samuel's core territories in the western highlands of western Macedonia. Samuel was forced into an almost entirely defensive stance. He fortified the passes and routes from the coastline and valleys held by the Byzantines to the territory remaining under his control. Over the next few years, the Byzantine offensive began to slow, and after no significant gains were made, although an attempt by the Bulgarians to counterattack in 1009 was defeated at the Battle of Kleidion, east of Thessalonica. In 1014, Basil was ready to launch a campaign aimed at destroying Bulgarian resistance once and for all. Thus, on the 29th of July, 1014, at the Battle of Kleidion, he and his general, Nikephoros Xivias, outmaneuvered the Bulgarian army, defending one of his fortified passes. Samuel avoided capture due to the valor of his son Gabriel. But after crushing the Bulgarians, Basil was not quite satisfied with a normal victory. He decided to exact a little bit of vengeance in a very interesting way, capturing 15,000 prisoners and blinding 99 of every 100 men, leaving one man with one eye in each cohort to lead the rest back to their ruler. This act of cruelty was partly because in Byzantine eyes the Bulgarians were rebels, and blinding was the usual punishment for being a rebel. Well, the other reason is, too, kind of multifaceted. You see, it's like this. First of all, you get rid of all of the soldiers. Instead of taking them prisoner, well, you send them back, but they can never fight again. But through blinding all of them in this way, well, they're not just a burden upon themselves, but think of almost 15,000 blinded men being sent back to their home city. Someone has to take care of them. I mean, the Bulgarians aren't going to kill all of their own soldiers, aren't they? What an interesting way to cripple an enemy. A very cruel way, but hey, credit where it's due. I bet the soldiers did not see that coming. Well, as for Samuel, yes, he might have gotten away, but reportedly when all of these 15,000 blinded men began showing up, all with their hands on their shoulders like one big, horrible, macabre conga line, he was so struck by the sight of it that he just couldn't believe it. He went into shock, and he died 2 days later, on October the 6th, because apparently this sight gave him a stroke. Not good. Well, Bulgaria did continue to fight for 4 more years, fueled by Basil's cruelty, but they did submit in 1018. This submission resulted from continued military pressure and a successful diplomatic campaign aimed at dividing and suborning the Bulgarian leadership. This victory and the later submission of the Serbs fulfilled one of Basil's goals as the empire regained its ancient Danubian frontier for the first time in 400 years. Now, word had certainly gotten around about what happened to the Bulgarians. Therefore, the rulers of the neighboring Croatia, Krasimir III and Goslav, who were previously allies of Bulgaria, accepted Basil's supremacy to avoid the same fate. Old Basil, well, he was quite delighted and warmly received their offers of vassalage. He even awarded them the honorary title of Patricios. Croatia remained a tributary state to Basil until his death. Well, before returning to Constantinople, Basil celebrated his triumph in Athens, of all places. He showed considerable statesmanship in his treatment of the defeated Bulgarians, at least the ones that he wasn't gouging the eyes out of. He gave many former Bulgarian leaders court titles, actually, positions in provincial administration, and high commands in the army. He sought to absorb the Bulgarian elite into Byzantine society, and that was exactly what happened. Well, because Bulgaria did not have a monetary economy, at least in the same extent as Byzantium, Basil decided to accept Bulgarian taxes in kind. However, this policy was reversed by his successors, leading to significant Bulgarian discontent and rebellion later in the 11th century. Campaigns against the Khazar successor states. Though the Kievan Rus had significantly diminished the power of the Khazar Khaganate in the 960s, the Byzantines had not fully capitalized on the resulting power vacuum to reassert their dominion over Crimea and the Black Sea regions. By 1016, Byzantine ambitions turned towards these areas. Basil, in a combined effort with Mstislav of Chernigov, launched a military campaign against Crimea, much of which was under the control of the Khazar successor kingdom, led by George Zul, based in Kerch. According to Kedrenos, this campaign was successful. Zul was captured, his kingdom destroyed, and the Byzantines subsequently occupied southern Crimea. Byzantine-Georgian Wars. The stability of the Byzantine Empire was significantly challenged by internal rebellions and external threats. A full-scale rebellion was initiated by Bardas Skleros in 976 that spread all across Asia Minor. It was during this period that Basil was supported by the Georgian prince David III of Tau, who played a crucial role in the loyalist victory at the Battle of Pankaleia. For this support, David was granted a lifetime membership to Raid Shadow Legends. No, I'm just joking. A lifetime rule over key territories in eastern Asia Minor. However, the relationship between Constantinople and the Georgian rulers was complex and often fraught with distrust, especially after David's perceived rebuff during Bardas Phogas's revolt in 987. After the failure of this revolt and the death of David of Tau in 1001, Basil inherited key provinces, including Tau, Phasiane, and Speri, which were reorganized into the theme of Iberia, with its capital at Theodosiopolis. This inheritance forced Bagrat III, the Georgian Bagratid ruler, to recognize the new territorial arrangements. Bagrat's son, George I, however, harbored ambitions to restore the Kuropalates' succession to Georgia. In 1015 to 1016, amidst the campaigns in Tau and alliances with external powers like the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, George posed a challenge to Byzantine authority. With Bulgaria subdued in 1018 and al-Hakim well and truly deceased, Basil was ready to launch a significant campaign against Georgia. By late 1021, Basil led a large Byzantine army, reinforced by the formidable Varangian Guard, into Georgian territory. The Byzantines advanced, recovering Phasiane and pushing beyond Tau into the heart of Georgia. George I responded by burning Oltisi to deny its use to the enemy and retreating to Kola. A significant confrontation occurred near the village of Shirimni at Lake Palakazio on September the 11th, where Basil achieved a victory, yet a costly one, but it did prompt George to retreat even further. Basil then plundered the region and withdrew to Trebizond for the winter. Despite several attempts at negotiation, the conflict continued on. George received reinforcements and even allied with Byzantine commanders Nikephoros Phokas and Nikephoros Siphias, and it's a different Nikephoros Phokas, by the way, during their short-lived insurrection against Basil. In December, amidst all of this chaos, the Armenian king Senekerim of Vaspurakan, facing pressures from the Seljuk Turks, surrendered his kingdom to Basil. In early 1022, Basil launched a final offensive and decisively defeated the Georgians at the Battle of Svindax. Facing threats from both land and sea, George was compelled to agree to a treaty that ceded significant territories back to the Byzantines. As part of the treaty terms, George's infant son, Bagrat, was also taken hostage by Basil. Little harsh, isn't it? Well, he's young. I'm sure he'll forget about it. Well, Basil was greatly admired by his army, because he actually spent most of his reign right there with them, rather than merely sending orders from Constantinople like other people, many of his predecessors. This direct leadership fostered a strong loyalty within the ranks, enhancing his influence over both political and church matters. He also adopted the lifestyle of a soldier, one of the boys, even eating the same daily rations as his troops, which was probably the bravest thing he could have done. Basil also took under his protection the children of deceased army officers, providing them with shelter, food, and education. Many of these children grew up to become soldiers and officers themselves, effectively replacing their fathers in the ranks. Among these, actually, was Isaac Komnenos, who rose to become emperor, by the way, much later. Video on him soon. Maybe. See how we go. Basil also secured the annexation of sub-kingdoms in Armenia, and a promise that its capital and surrounding regions would be willed to Byzantium following the death of its king. In 1021, he negotiated the cessation of the kingdom of Vaspurakan from its king, Senekerim John, in exchange for estates in Sepastea. These territories were heavily fortified, creating a robust frontier in the highlands. Additionally, Byzantine forces restored much control over southern Italy, which had been lost over the previous 150 years. At the time of his death, on December the 15th, 1025, Basil was preparing a military expedition to recover Sicily. His death marked the end of the longest reign of any Byzantine or Roman emperor up to that point. At his death, the Byzantine Empire's territories stretched from southern Italy to the Caucasus and from the Danube to the Levant, its greatest extent since the Muslim conquests 4 centuries earlier. Although initially intended to be buried in the last available sarcophagus in the rotunda of Constantine I in the Church of the Holy Apostles, Basil later requested that his brother and successor, Constantine VII, bury him in the Church of St. John the Theologian, outside the walls of Constantinople. The words on his tomb read thusly: "From the day that the King of Heaven called upon me to become the Emperor, the great overlord of the world, no one saw my spear lie idle. I stayed alert throughout my life and protected the children of the new Rome, valiantly campaigning both in the west and at the outposts of the east. O man, seeing now my tomb here, reward me for my campaigns with your prayers." And with that we reach the end of our biography of Basil II, or his more popular name, the Bulgar Slayer. Well, I'd like to thank you for joining me, and I'd like to thank Stark Factory, JC, and Jeffrey for being top-tier patrons. 3 Chads. Thank you very much. If you would like to do the whole Patreon thing, well, you know what to do. It's in the description. Otherwise, just make sure you get a good sleep tonight, drink plenty of water, and, we'll meet back here tomorrow. Same time, same place, right here on YouTube. Good night, everybody. Sweet dreams.